Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Jobe and Nick Constantine here, live from the Battery. And, ooh, today smells wonderful.
It smells wonderful. It tastes wonderful. Food and wine, favorite things on earth. I'm very excited to have this conversation. And I was lucky enough to eat at Kitty Dare, the restaurant we're talking about. So I will immediately consider myself an expert because I ate there once and because that's just how I am.
You just consider yourself an expert, whatever we're talking about.
I have to. Isn't that the game? Isn't that the game? We're supposed to sound like we're experts, to sound like we know what we're talking about. So without further ado, we have Jaamy Zarnegar, who founded it and has a lot of experience in the restaurant industry. And we have Chef Giuseppe Esposito, who is the chef of the restaurant. So we are going to get to these guys, but let me just say it. It is a wonderful restaurant. It feels a lot like the restaurants I grew up in, going to Astoria. It feels very authentic and neighborhoody. And Chef is really pushing the boundaries on how he's mixing Mediterranean ingredients.
I was going to say, we have to say, because when you say Kitty Dare, it doesn't necessarily come to mind what type of cuisine we're talking about, but it is Mediterranean.
We'll get to that. And I think it's funny, and I think Karen, their PR extraordinaire, and I were having the conversation. People botch Mediterranean so bad. Like, oh, it's Mediterranean. It's like, do you know how many countries sit on the Mediterranean? Do you know how different the cuisine is? And people think they're similar, and they are to some extent, but Greek to Moroccan could not be more different in the way they go about food. The Greeks are it's oregano, lemon, garlic, very simple. Moroccans got the spice palette and the crazy spices. So when we say Mediterranean, please don't think you know what we're talking about, because there's lots of that go into Mediterranean. So with that being said, Jaamy, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here. Thanks.
Glad to have you.
Welcome.
Why don't you frame, you've been in the restaurant industry a while, talk about everything that you've got on your culinary journey to lead you to this point.
So it all started back in 1980 when I started as a dishwasher at UNC Greensboro's cafeteria. It's a wonderful experience.
Wow, I might have seen you during the summer. I lived in Greensboro. I grew up, went to camps there. So who knows?
I love you in North Carolina and Greensboro. And then I moved, there was a little restaurant on campus. I became a dishwasher there. It was a big promotion from the cafeteria onto a busser waiter. Then managed the dining room, and then was able to start working off campus, and eventually ended up at a great restaurant called Southern Lights in Greensboro, North Carolina, which I feel like in the early 80s was way ahead of its time. And it was there that I really sort of fell in love with food and wine, because I worked under a great general manager, Ann Steckedy, who taught me a lot about wine, and I also worked in the kitchen with John Dries, the other owner, and Chef Beth Kieshneman. Those three people kind of framed the future for me in the restaurant business. And I was in Greensboro until 93, worked at Southern Lights, and then moved to Athens, Georgia, where I became co-owner general manager of the very famous Last Resort Grill.
Wonderful.
And I was there from 93 until really the end of December of the 20 when I moved to Atlanta. Resort was changing ownership somewhat, and I moved on and was looking for a chef, and it just happened that I talked to this beautiful young lady that I worked with in Athens, who was in Australia, who had met this great Italian guy, and they were going to move here because her mother lived in Roswell, and they were going to either move here or go to Italy. So they stayed here. We talked
almost the same place.
Yes.
Atlanta and Italy. That's like, wow. That's an easy decision.
Roswell, Italy.
So we talked, about opening a restaurant. The pandemic happened, and a couple of years into it, I was like, okay, at some point this will end. So I recontacted Megan, who was now married to Giuseppe, and Megan and I worked at Last Resort, and we sat down. And the partnership started in opening Kitty Dare, which opened in November of 21, the day after Thanksgiving, kind of tail end of the pandemic.
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
I, learned a lot along the way in many restaurants, and was able to manage the Last Resort in the kitchen as the head chef on 2 different occasions where we couldn't find the right leadership. Primarily worked in the front of the house, but it's been a really wonderful some 44-year journey.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think I have so many questions, but I want to go over to Chef Giuseppe because you said such a good job setting him up. Chef, how about give your background and what brought you here? And then I'll ask a ton of questions mostly about Athens, because I'm just so curious. But tell us what brought you here.
Brought me here, like, mostly, my wife, Megan.
Okay.
Like, been traveling.
And then on your culinary
that's a good answer.
Yeah,
so
that's the correct answer. My wife did it.
So basically, yeah, I was working all over in Australia.
Okay.
So starting from the beginning, I did a culinary school in Italy for 5 years in Correggio. So my background starts from, I'm born and raised in Reggio Emilia, which is like in the Emilia region, is like the beginning of the northern Italy.
Okay.
Kind of like right above Tuscany. But my whole family is from the south, from Napoli. So I always had these like culinary kind of like dichotomy between north and south.
Yeah.
Always like, I've been lucky enough to see both of the worlds, like in the
and we're going to elaborate on that,
right,
because unfortunately most Americans think that Italian food is like pizza place food, and they don't understand the difference in the cuisines and the seafood and the mountains and the regions, and we'll get to that. But okay, so your family's from the south. You're raised just north of Tuscany. You went to culinary school there.
Yes.
Okay, so bring us up. So you're working in restaurants around Italy and then Australia.
Yes, I've been working. I did this culinary school for 5 years. So in Italy, like, is a high school, the culinary school. So for those 5 years, from where you are 14 till 19.
Of course it is. Yeah. Of course it is. Yeah, just go to chef school. You're fine.
And I started working in a restaurant already as a teenager, from around like 14, 15. And then the school that would send you like around Italy towards like on the Garda's Lake, Como's Lake, on those like restaurants around there, very touristic place like that. After that, I worked around Italy. I did a culinary exchange with this cooking school in Albacete, Spain, close to Valencia.
Cool.
I worked a little while in Italy, went to London, had some friends there. I worked there for a little more than a year. Came back to Italy. After being in London, went back to my like small town in Italy, 5,000 people. I was like, what I'm doing here, getting bored. Restarted traveling, went to Australia for a couple of years, also there, like worked as a chef all over the place. And then I met Megan, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now. We came back here, worked in a couple of places, met Jaamy, and since then, we start talking about like opening something and food and this and that, and that's how basically we started.
So outside your wife, what was your other biggest influence during that kind of growth period, development period for you?
What do you mean?
The biggest influence on you as far as the culinary side of things from your early days. Who or what region may have been that biggest influence on where you are today?
I don't know. Probably, the women in my family.
Okay.
Kind of don't like to cook. I grew up with like a bunch of aunties and my mom cooking and all of that. So
now the more important question: who was the best cook in your family? Because this is a much harder one for Italian to answer. Because someone's going to be listening and they're going to choke him if he says the wrong answer. So which auntie or which female in the family was the best cook?
My mom.
Of course. We knew that was coming. All right. So again, I have so many freaking questions. So now we're going to have fun and just jump across them. I'm going to ask you random questions. So Athens, were you a college football fan?
Yes, but remember, I went to a school without a football team at UNC Greensboro.
When you got to Athens, you may not have been, but
very quickly I became a diehard Georgia football fan.
Okay, so very important. So you saw the regimes, you saw the Mark Richt transition.
With Goff, then Donan, Mark Richt, and then of course Kirby Smart arrives, and everything changes. In my opinion,
everything. So this station, our sister station, 680 FM, has been the official talk station of Georgia. We have designations. I've met Mark Richt many times. We're around them all the time. It's unbelievable what the program has done. But just talk a little bit about what Athens was like as that college town and how much you've seen Athens change. Because I recall 15, 20 years ago, like anyone was going to Georgia. Now you need a 1,500 on your SATs and like a blessing from God himself to get into the school. So talk about how much Athens changed and how Last Resort changed with it as a town.
The most important thing about changing the restaurant as Athens became a bigger, more sophisticated city from what was a beautiful, quaint college town, in my opinion, was that you have to keep up with the times. And one of the things that Melissa Clegg, the main owner, and I, junior partner, were very aware of how we changed the menu to keep up and modernize the menu. Of course, there were staples we would never take off the menu, but then there were items that change every 2 or 3 years. And Athens grew, we grew with it. In came, other restaurants. We actually opened 5 and 10 with Hugh Atchison, who then, after we had got out of it, won the James Beard there and, was on Top Chef. And so that really, Athens has changed quite a bit. I was just recently there, and there's a new hotel there, beautiful restaurant there, which is run by the Indigo Road Group from Charleston, and so it's really changing. In a way, it's changing for the better because there's so much great restaurants and diversity now. In a way, it's lost to me its charm of that small town, but it was going to happen.
But that had to be different than your Greensboro experience. While Greensboro was a bigger city than Athens, and I love it. I grew up there. Part of the reason I left after college is I could see what Greensboro was going to be for the next 25 years. It's a wonderful place, but it doesn't change very much.
It's changing in a way that UNCG still doesn't have a football program. It's still primarily a liberal arts school. It was an incredible university. Right. But the city has grown. There's a new aquatic center. They did the U.S. trials there a few years ago. The new baseball stadium downtown. They've resurrected the downtown. We never went downtown at that time. So, but it's completely different than living in a college town where the whole world is about Georgia in a way.
Right.
And we see actually so many visitors. And of course, we had the pleasure of having 2 restaurants during the Olympics there, and the finals of what we call football and everybody else calls soccer here, where it was in Athens, preliminary volleyball and rhythmic gymnastics. So it's been great. Both are very different, though. You're so correct.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure that, we'll get into it in the next segment, but that I'm sure shaped some of the things you probably felt you can do or couldn't do. Because, again, I remember the restaurant culinary scene in Greensboro during the 80s when you were there, and there was so much of it that was just very much the same. And then, you get into Athens where you're able to start doing things differently. So, when we come back from the break, we'll dive in a little bit more. We want to learn a little more about
So many more questions. More questions.
Where Kitty Dare came from, and then we'll dive into the food and the culinary experience. So you've been listening to the Marketing Mad Men on Extra 106.3, and we'll be right back.